as we speak. There we go. Right. So welcome everyone to the Give Hedgehogs a Home talk, our first one for the urban wilding month that we've got here for Greenhavens. Welcome, first of all. Thank you. We've got a few things really to go through tonight, but the main highlight, which we're really looking forward to, is a fantastic talk from Holly. Holly is from the People's Trust for Endangered Species. Yeah, we're really looking forward to that tonight. I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can see us all. There we go. That's better, isn't it? Spot on. So just a couple of things really, just as we kick off. This whole scheme has been gratefully funded by the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport in association with the National Lottery Community Fund. Rolls off the tongue, that, doesn't it? So one of the things that we've agreed to do, if you don't mind, is just to run a quick poll to see how you all heard about this meeting. So if you wouldn't mind, very quickly, if you don't mind, just quickly filling in something that's about to pop up on your screen, we would all be very grateful, just so we can keep tally of everyone. Thank you very much for that. I love watching it come in, I have to say. It's like watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire's Ask the Audience. The bars moving across the screen. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, we'll get started now, if that's okay with you, Holly. I think we've got someone who's just coming in as we speak. So as I said, Holly is here to talk to us about how we can help our hedgehogs and helping them find safe spaces and various other little things as well, how we can look after them. And as I said before, Holly is from the People's Trust for Endangered Species. So I'll hand over to you now, Holly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just going to share my screen.
No worries.
Can you all see that okay?
Yep, all good on this end.
Okay, so as George said, I am Holly. I am the campaigns manager at People's Trust for Endangered Species. And one of the major campaigns that I run every single year is a wildlife-friendly garden campaign. So mainly focused on what we can do in our gardens to help wildlife. But in particular tonight, I'm going to focus on hedgehogs. And then at the end, you'll have a chance to ask any questions, and my colleague Grace is going to also join at the end to help with questions, who is our hedgehog officer, so you'll get to talk to her as well. And just before I get started, I just wanted to say that sit back, relax, and take in the information. You don't need to scribble it all down and take it all in at once, because I will link at the end to a web page that has all this information on, where you can download instructions, access videos, and some more information. So yeah, I hope you find it informative and interesting. And we'll get started. So the contents of the talk is, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the People's Trust, where I work, and the types of work that we do on hedgehogs. I'm going to go through hedgehogs, the basics, for those that don't know that much about them. I'm going to talk about hedgehogs in the landscape. So where do we find them? Where do they roam? What type of habitats do they need? Why bother? So what is the population status of hedgehogs? And I'm going to touch upon why they're declining. And then I'm going to go on to how you lovely people can help hedgehogs in your garden or local green space, park, green, anywhere you can access. I'm going to talk through how you can spot hedgehogs in your garden, and also touch upon a few additional ways you can help hedgehogs. So firstly, just a brief introduction to People's Trust for Endangered Species. We're a team of just 20 staff, all passionate about protecting wildlife and wild habitats. Hedgehogs is one of our priority species, so we do a lot of work on hedgehogs, research projects, practical conservation work, that kind of thing. Some of our work includes putting nesting boxes up for a range of different species. We do a lot of monitoring programs, so basically just trying to get an idea of the population status, which species are declining, which ones are doing well, and also things like reintroductions. So of course, it's all good and well conserving species, but then you also have to make sure that you are conserving the habitat they need to thrive. So some of our key habitats that we work on are hedgerows, which again are really important for hedgehogs, wood pasture, grassland, and traditional orchards. We also own 2 nature reserves, which we manage for wildlife. Our largest one is in the Isle of Wight. We have lots of interesting species on there, rare species like red squirrels. We actually discovered a new species of moth recently. So yeah, we manage those, and we also fund over 50 research projects worldwide, because as well as doing things in your garden to help wildlife and managing habitats for hedgehogs, you also need to do research to ensure that what we're doing is actually working. Okay, so just going to move on to hedgehogs, the basics, just to give you a bit more information about them. So the Western European hedgehog is the one that we see in the UK. Here's a little picture of one with some nesting materials in its mouth. It's one of 17 hedgehog species worldwide. It's Britain's only spiny mammal. It's actually changed little in 15 million years. So in terms of evolution, it has very much stayed the same. Its defense mechanism is the same, which is to curl up in a ball. So often it can't keep up with the changing world around them, which is why we need to step in on an individual level and help them where we can. They're omnivorous, so their diet mainly comprises of insects. And of course, they are a hibernating species. So they hibernate from September, October time through to February and March. So in terms of their distribution, they are found all across the UK, on the islands, Wales, Scotland. They use a huge range of habitats. So as I already mentioned, they use hedgerows, they're found in farmland, they're found in our gardens, urban parks. The largest urban population is actually in London, in Regent's Park, near London Zoo, if any of you have been there. And the few habitats that they don't use are things like moors and marshes and pine woods, because these habitats don't really give them the materials that they need to nest, which is really important for hedgehogs. And I'll come on to that a bit later in the talk. So in terms of their behavior, they're nocturnal, so they will be out at dusk, dawn, or nighttime. Here's 2 hedgehogs out at night. They're generally solitary animals. They don't really live in social groups. They tend to have kind of a mutual agreement to kind of just avoid each other. They kind of coexist really fine in places where there's an abundance of food, habitat, nesting materials, but they kind of just like to keep themselves to themselves. They're non-territorial, so they are really aggressive, but they will compete over food and females if the resources are limited. Very reliant on smell and hearing because they do actually have poor eyesight, and often quite noisy individuals. So if you do have hedgehogs in your garden, you will hear a range of different noises such as snuffling and huffing and puffing and that kind of thing. So it can be really cute if you do have them in your garden to listen out to all the different noises that they make. So here is a mother hedgehog with a hoglet in her mouth. In terms of courtship, again, I just said they're quite noisy behavior. They're quite promiscuous. They do actually mate with multiple partners, both males and females, throughout the breeding season. Their average litter size is around 4 to 5 hoglets. Not all of them make it usually. I'd say for each litter, probably about 3 make it. They're born blind, pink, and they are liable to be deserted or eaten if their mother is disturbed. So if you do encourage hedgehogs in your garden, one thing that is really, really important is if you know there is a mother and she has young, just to keep well away from them and don't disturb them. And then again, if you are lucky enough to have them in your garden, by 5 weeks, you will see little hoglets running around. So this just gives you an idea of the hedgehog year. As I've already mentioned, they are a hibernating species. So they will go into hibernation around September, October time. Males tend to go in hibernation a bit quicker, like in September time, because they've already built up all the fat they need to last throughout hibernation, whereas females expel a lot of their energy rearing their young. So you will still see female hedgehogs out again, still until October, and usually emerge about February, March time, depending on how warm the weather is. So this gives you an idea of their diet. As I've already mentioned, they do mainly eat insects, in particular beetles, worms, caterpillars, millipedes, but they are also opportunistic feeders as well. So they will eat eggs, small birds, small mammals, frogs, if they can get their hands on them. But if you do want to encourage hedgehogs in your garden and make sure they have an abundance of food, really, you also want to be encouraging insects as well, which I will come on to later in the talk. So I just wanted to quickly go over their nesting as well, because nesting is a very important part of hedgehog ecology. They use nests throughout the whole year. They will use a nest every day of their lives. So if you want to encourage hedgehogs in your garden and give them a safe place, you need to offer them a safe and secure nesting area. So there's 3 different types of nests. The first one is daytime nests. And this is basically just a nest for them to retreat to in the day, to have a nap, hide from predators. Usually kind of like a flimsy nest. It's not very well put together, just some leaves and some grass, basically just anything to keep them secure during the daytime. They also have their breeding nests. So this is for females and their dependent young. So they'll put a bit more effort into these nests, use different types of leaves, grass, anything that they can really get their hands on. Yeah, and then they also have their hibernation nests, which definitely put more effort into these nests, again, using different types of logs, twigs, leaves, grass. But one thing that they tend to do for their hibernation nests is they tend to hibernate under thorny material that you can see in the diagram here. So if you have any kind of thorny material, especially brambles in your garden, it'd be really good to leave an area for hedgehogs, especially during the hibernation period, because they will use it. Okay, so now coming on to hedgehogs in the landscape. Where are they? Where can we find them? We have been involved with some radio tracking studies. Apologies, this is quite an old photo, but it gives you an idea. From radio tracking studies, we have found that they are highly active animals, and they do range far and wide. Male hedgehogs in particular can travel up to 1 mile each night, which if you think about it is quite far for a little small mammal like a hedgehog. And yeah, one of the things that they need to be able to survive is to be able to move freely and safely through a range of habitats. So like I already mentioned, grassland, farmland, urban parks, and also our gardens. So this is just a Google image to give you an idea of actually how much habitat they need and they use. This area is a 40-hectare golf course. And from one of the radio tracking studies, we found that if we zoom in here, this is a male hedgehog that was tracked using this much of a 40-hectare golf course over 12 days. So quite a lot of traveling. If you think about it, our gardens aren't nearly as big as that. So they do really need access to lots of our gardens to be able to access all the resources they need, especially food, water, and a mate. So of course, why bother? What's the problem? Why do we need to help hedgehogs? So as I've already mentioned, hedgehogs are one of our priority species. We do a lot of research on them. From one of our surveys, it was actually from our survey that we found 20 years ago that there was a significant decline in hedgehogs. Rural populations, so ones found in farmland, big land areas, they actually have declined by 50%, which is half of the population. And at the same time, the urban population has declined by up to 1/3. So really, really significant and worrying declines. And it really was from here that kick-started our major hedgehog programs. And we do allocate a lot of funds and resources to hedgehogs because, of course, with the population at this rate, they really do need our help. So what are the threats affecting hedgehogs? So there's a mix of natural and anthropogenic threats. So by anthropogenic, I mean human-induced threats. So the ones that are relevant to you guys really is too tidy gardens that are overlawned, overmowed, just basically kept too tidy. I know it looks good, but it's not so good for hedgehogs. Again, slug pellets and chemicals, also one of the threats. fewer insects to eat, road traffic, pesticides, that kind of thing. So a real mix of threats affecting the hedgehog population. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to ways you guys can help hedgehogs on your doorstep. So as I've already mentioned, they can roam really far and wide. So they need access to our gardens. Now, this is the single best thing you can do to help hedgehogs. And all you need to do is put a hole in your fence, in your wall, just to make sure they have access to your garden. Because they will use it, they will use your neighbor's gardens. If you have a hole in your garden and your neighbor doesn't, speak to your neighbor, speak to your community. We do actually work with developers now who have made it mandatory to have hedgehog holes in all of their developments, which is really amazing because the hedgehogs do really need to use it to find all the resources that they need. So if you are thinking about putting a hedgehog hole in your garden, all you need to do is put a 13 times 13 centimeter hole. This is sufficient for all hedgehogs to get through, but it's also too small for most pets to get out and too small for other animals such as foxes and cats if you don't want them to come in. If you really wanted to make it cat-proof or fox-proof, you could also make it into a tunnel so only hedgehogs can get through. And again, if you're not up for making the hole yourself, you can buy pre-modified gravel boards, which is what you can see in the top right. So if you just take out a plank of your fence and then you can put in the pre-modified board with the 13 times 13 hole. Or if you are actually getting your garden done up, just speak to the contractor. Many contractors and developers now are quite aware of the hedgehog holes. As I've said, we've worked with a lot of developers who know about this. So just speak to a contractor and see if they can put one in for you. Okay, so once hedgehogs have access to your garden, one of the things you can do to help them is leave a wild corner. Now, there's not so much that you need to do here. You simply need to leave it undisturbed. A corner is ideal, especially if it's partially shaded. And you're just basically allowing grass and weed seedlings to germinate. And you can also add wildlife attracting plants at a later date. Yeah, and basically what you're doing here is you're just offering hedgehogs privacy, especially in the breeding season. It'll be a perfect place for them to go and make a nest. Also, wild corners attract lots of insects, which means lots of food for hedgehogs. And of course, the more obvious one is that they will be less vulnerable to predation if their predators can't find them in a wild corner. So yeah, there's just some of the insects that a wild corner will attract. So you've got your beetles, your worms, your earwigs, that kind of thing. So another thing you can do to help hedgehogs is also you can build them a log pile. So when people build a log pile, it tends to keep the warmth inside. So this is really attractive to hedgehogs as, again, a nesting area. It also is really good for detrivore insects, so things like beetles, millipedes, wood lice, because they feed on the decaying wood, and in turn that can enrich the soil whilst also being a tasty food source for hedgehogs. So yeah, what you want to use here, you want to collect dead wood from your garden or local park. You can speak to your local wildlife reserve, and basically just put them in a corner of your garden. And yeah, I just say the bigger the better, because as I've already mentioned with the dead wood and the beetles and that kind of insects, they do break down the log matter, and the decaying of the logs can actually replenish them. So yeah, just the bigger the better. So another thing you can do, it's not so relevant for right now, but when autumn does come around, hedgehogs love leaf piles because it offers them shelter and a great nesting spot again. Leaf piles in general are just really good for any hibernating animals. So a range of different small mammals. It will also attract amphibians like frogs and countless insects. So if you do have a leaf pile, you'll find insects like caterpillars, butterflies, that kind of thing. So what you want to do is you just want to gather leaves from your garden, yeah, put them in a corner, have them at least 1 foot deep and in a shaded area. And if you leave them over time, they will actually rot down by spring. And then these can be used as a soil improver or mulch, which again, I will talk more in detail a bit later in the talk. Okay, so those are more natural ways to offer hedgehogs a safe place to nest and shelter. But if you want to get a little bit more creative, you can actually build your own hedgehog house. It's a really fun activity, especially if you have kids. We get a lot of people sending pictures in to us like this one of DIY hedgehog houses, and they are just as popular as the natural ones as well. So you can buy them pre-built online or at your local garden centre, but again, yeah, making your own is a really fun activity. One thing I do want to mention is if you are building your own, again, make sure you have an entrance that's 13 times 13 centimetre, because what you don't want is to build a hedgehog house, have a hedgehog in there, a mother with her young, and then a predator being able to squeeze through and predate on them. So just make sure it has an entrance. Again, they're best placed in a sheltered location, along a boundary really, like a wall at the back of the garden, just so it doesn't really get disturbed. And one of the fun things about having a hedgehog house is obviously they are nocturnal, so you might not necessarily see them, and you also don't want to disturb them either by looking in. But some of the ways you can tell if you do have a hedgehog using your hedgehog house is you can put some straw or dry leaves outside, and they will tend to pick them up and take them inside for bedding. Or you can simply put a stick in front of the entrance and they'll knock it out of the way. So that's just a really cute way to see if you do actually have hedgehogs using the hedgehog house. And of course, they do need cleaning if they have been used, because you want to avoid any parasites or diseases, that kind of thing. So when you do clean it, make sure it's in March, April's time. So it's after hibernation, but it's before breeding season. And again, we do have detailed instructions of exact measurements and that kind of thing of how to make your own, which I'll link to at the end. Okay, so a bit more of an obvious one. One of the good things you can do to help hedgehogs is create a feeding station for them. Usually when they're coming out of hibernation or just about to go into hibernation, when they really need to get some extra energy. So the kind of food you want to leave out for them is meaty dog or cat food, or you can actually buy specialized hedgehog food. Please only give them water, no milk, as not many people know, but hedgehogs are actually lactose intolerant, so milk can make them poorly. At the top there, you can see that it's just food on a dish that you can put out. If you're not bothered about other animals coming into your garden, so foxes, squirrels, maybe your neighbor's cat, I don't know, then you can simply put the food on a dish and they will eat perfectly fine together with other animals. But if you really just want hedgehogs in your garden, then I would look into making a specific feeding station, again with the 13 times 13 centimetre hole entrance, just so that hedgehogs can only fit in. Okay, so I've talked about giving hedgehogs access to your garden and how to give them a safe place to nest. But now I'm just going to touch upon some of the things you can do in your garden to make sure it's safe once you do actually have hedgehogs in there. And one of the things is to keep your pond safe. Obviously, I don't know how many of you guys have ponds. If you do, amazing. If you don't, I would think about adding one if you can. Like simply, it could be a bucket, dig a hole, put the bucket in there. It will be a great source for all different types of wildlife. And it's just an all-round drinking source for hedgehogs. So yeah, if you don't have one, I would consider putting one in. But if you do have one, it's really important that you do keep your pond safe, because hedgehogs are actually really good swimmers. Their spines are hollow, so they're quite buoyant in water. But what they do struggle with is getting out afterwards. So a lot of them do drown, not being able to get back out of ponds. So yeah, one of the things you want to do is you just want to add a ramp in there. You can see from the photo here, it has a nice ramp for hedgehogs to get out after they've had a nice, lovely swim. And it can just be something simple like a stone, some chicken wire, or just a piece of wood, anything just to make sure they can get back out. Another thing, maybe more of an obvious one again, is just stop using chemicals if you want to keep hedgehogs safe. There's limited evidence for a direct link between chemicals and the death of hedgehogs, but obviously the chemicals do affect slugs and snails and insects that they will then feed on, so it can indirectly affect hedgehogs. And there is risks of sublethal effects, so the chemicals might not lead to their death, but it might reduce their breeding success, and that's obviously not great for a declining population. Yeah, we already know there's widespread use of pesticides in agriculture. Obviously, this is hard to change and manage because these farmers do give us all our food, but that's why it's so much more important that us on an individual level can stop using them in our garden. And again, if you do have a pest in your garden that you really want to get rid of, say slugs or something like that, then instead of using chemicals, just encourage natural predators into your garden. So like hedgehogs and frogs, because they will feed on them anyway and get rid of them. So yeah, that's just something to think about. Again, a bit more of an obvious one, but litter is a real problem for hedgehogs. As you can see from the photos, some of the more obvious culprits are six-pack holders, polystyrene cups, tin cans, netting, elastic bands. So yeah, you probably don't need me to tell you, but just any litter get rid of in your garden or maybe in your local park if you see any. If you do have netting in your garden, say like a football sports nets, we already know that hedgehogs come out at night time, so maybe you can put the sports net out in the day and then put it in your garage at night just to avoid any hedgehogs getting tangled up in there. Okay, so another thing to keep your hedgehogs safe is to check before strimming. This is unfortunately a picture of one of many strimming victims. Hedgehogs don't actually have a flight reflex. So obviously in humans, we have the fight or flight reflex. When we're in danger, we can hear it and we can run away from it. But hedgehogs have evolved with their spines as their defense mechanism. So if they hear a strimmer coming along, same with cars or any kind of threat, they will just curl up into a ball. And of course, that doesn't protect them from strimmers. And as they do nest all year round, there is really no good time to cut or trim. So the only advice I can give you here is just check the area beforehand, have a feel around, look out for any signs that they may be there, like nests or footprints or droppings, that kind of thing. Or if you actually can see a hedgehog, maybe just leave that area to make sure that they're safe. Okay, so another thing to be careful of is having bonfires in your garden. Again, not relevant right now, but when bonfire night comes around in November, we've already spoken about how log piles are really attractive to hedgehogs. They do nesting there. So if you do have a log pile in your garden ready to burn, I have two bits of advice. One is to potentially relocate the bonfire somewhere nearby, so you can take it all apart and then rebuild it just before lighting it. Just that way you can see if there's a hedgehog there or not. Or if you know you're going to build a bonfire, simply just do it on the day before burning, and that way doesn't give time for hedgehogs to move in there. Okay, so talked about giving hedgehogs access to your garden, what you can do to give them a safe place to nest and breed, ways to keep your garden safe. But now I'm going to just touch upon some indirect ways you can help hedgehogs. And as you can already probably guess from what I've talked about and the picture, it is actually about giving a safe place for insects. So one of the best things you can do to encourage insects in your garden, and then obviously hedgehogs and other wildlife, is to build an insect hotel. So the aim of an insect hotel is basically to create as many different habitats as possible in one area. So obviously the image that I've used there, it's quite a large insect hotel, so don't be intimidated. They do not need to be that big. I just want to give you an idea of all the different types of habitats you can have within one. So the kind of materials you want to use for solitary bees is things like bamboo, hollow reed, and drilled logs. It's a great materials for solitary bees to lay their eggs in and breed. And solitary bees in general do like to be in the sun. So I would recommend putting your insect hotel, or especially the area that has those types of materials in, south facing or southeast facing, at the very least in a light shade, just so that they have a nice warm area to breed in. So for your beetles, woodlice and centipedes and millipedes, that kind of thing, we've already talked about. These are really important insects for hedgehogs. You want to be putting some dead wood and loose bark in there. Pine cones, dried leaves, moss, sticks, that kind of thing you can put in to fill the gaps. And these provide a great home for ladybirds. And then in order to create more of like a cool damp habitat, which is for frogs, toads and newts, that kind of thing, you can use larger logs, cardboard tubes, and then broken terracotta pots. Okay, so if you are not up for making an insect hotel or you don't have the materials for an insect hotel, another way you can encourage insects in your garden for hedgehogs to feed on is to create a mulch pile. Mulch piles are attractive to lots of animals. Small mammals like voles will take cover in there. They also are a great breeding site for lots of insects like stag beetles. You can buy mulch ready-made, but I would just recommend making it yourself just to make sure that everything in there is natural. And it's also just a really nice activity again to do with any kids or grandkids. So yeah, basically what you want to do is you just want to mix loads of different organic material. So wood chipping, shredded bark, sawdust, hay, give it a good mix together and choose a spot to put it in your garden. I usually recommend putting it around trees or around plants. What you want to do before laying the mulch down is you want to rake the ground beforehand, because this encourages the decaying of natural materials that's already there. And then you want to quickly just drizzle some water over the area to make it nice and moist, because that's, mulch really needs that moisture in order to be like top quality. And then, just spread a 5 to 10 centimeter thick layer. But what I do recommend is leaving at least a 5 centimeter mulch-free area around the trees and plants nearby, because mulch can spur growth and you don't want to have it too close to existing plants, just so that they're not out competing each other or anything like that. Okay, so the third thing I'm going to talk about of how you can entice insects into your garden is to create leaf mold. Again, already talked about making a leaf pile, but if you want to get a bit more creative and you have more leaves left over, you can create leaf mold. So what you want to do here is you want to stuff as many leaves as possible into a bin liner or an old compost bag. To make top quality leaf mold, you really want to get leaves like oak leaves, beech leaves, hornbeam leaves, that kind of thing. This is really what makes top quality leaf mold, which you can then spread over soil to enrich it. And then you want to, once you have your leaves in your bag, you just want to pierce some holes in there. And before you tie the top loosely, you want to add quite a bit of water if the leaves are dry, because again, like mulch, it's really important that it's moist. And especially if you're leaving it up to 2 years, which you can do with leaf mold, you want to periodically sprinkle more water in there to keep it moist over time. And again, once it's in your bag, put it in a sheltered, shaded part of your garden, and you can leave it up to 2 years. And there's 2 different things you can do with leaf mold, really. If it's under 2 years old, you can use it as part of your organic materials to make mulch. Which again, we've already said is really good for lots of different insects, so your beetles, snails, that kind of thing. But then if you do have leaf mold that is actually really top quality up to 2 years old, then you can use this to sow seeds in and put in compost pots to actually grow plants. So yeah, it's just up to you how long you want to leave it, really, but either way, it is a really useful thing in your garden. Okay, so I've talked about ways to help hedgehogs in your garden, and now I'm just going to run through some ways you can actually spot them in your garden. So when to look for hedgehogs, like I've already mentioned, from February, March time, they're active till about September, October time. Strictly nocturnal, so if you want to see them with the naked eye, you will have to look at dawn, dusk or nighttime. But again, if you aren't able to do that, you can set up a wildlife camera. I don't know how many of you have seen these before, but we do have a lot of supporters that send in footage of hedgehogs they see on their wildlife camera at nighttime. So again, that's a really fun thing to do. And you can also see lots of other visitors that you have that you never even knew. So what to listen out for? You can also listen out for hedgehogs through rummaging and snuffling sounds of vegetation. And if you are lucky enough to see their courtship ritual or hear it, it involves a lot of funny noise like snorting and puffing loudly. So again, you can have a listen out for that, those noises, and see if you have hedgehogs in your garden. So if you don't actually see hedgehogs themselves, some of the things you can look out for are signs and trails. So one thing you can look out for is droppings. These are about 5 centimeters long. They're in a shape of a sausage and usually pointy at one end. And one of the ways you can tell if it is a hedgehog dropping is you basically just look to see if there's any fragments of the types of insects they eat. So beetles, for example, looking for the shell of beetles or carapace of beetles, and wing cases. I don't know if it's a fruit pit there in the droppings, just that kind of thing. So yeah, you can look out for that to see if they have hedgehogs in your garden. You can also look out for footprints. Their back feet are actually the same width as their front feet, but just a little bit longer. When you do find hedgehog footprints, usually their claw marks show. They're around 2.5-3 centimeters long, but the footprints themselves are actually really hard to see with the naked eye on soil and that kind of thing. So one other thing you can look out for is actually just winding trails. So if you have long grass in your garden, the next morning, if you see kind of like a trail through the grass, that can indicate that you have hedgehog in your garden. But again, if you don't see any of that and you do suspect you have hedgehogs in your garden, another fun thing you can do is actually put down a footprint tunnel. These footprints, diagram that you can see here, are actually from a footprint tunnel. You can make your own or you can buy one. Again, I will link at the end more about this. But basically, you put food at one end of a tunnel and like an ink. It's charcoal and olive oil mixed together, and basically the hedgehog comes in, goes over the charcoal, goes through the tunnel over to the food, and then leaves, and then the next morning you can see the little footprints in the tunnel. So again, it's just a really sweet activity to do. Okay, so now I'm just going to finish the talk on some additional ways you can help hedgehogs, and mainly this is taking part in our surveys and helping us collect really important biological data that helps us basically see how they're faring and be able to allocate funds and resources to different parts of the UK where we know that hedgehogs need more help. So one of the simple surveys that we do is the BIG Hedgehog Map. And you can see here in the London area, people here have logged where they've seen a hedgehog. So you can simply just log where you saw a hedgehog. It can be dead or alive. The information is still really useful for us. And then I think the blue ones might be logging where you've done a hedgehog hole. So again, if you put one in your garden, please tell us about it, log it on the map, because this gives us an idea of how well connected gardens are in certain areas of the UK. Another thing you can do is just simply tell us what's in your garden. Tell us if you see any hedgehogs or any other mammals or any animals. It's all really useful information for us. Tell us what garden activities you've done. So if you end up doing any from the talk this evening, we'd really, really love to know. And you can upload photos as well. Again, I will link at the end of the talk where you can do this. But just to give you an example, this is a hedgehog that was sent in from one of our supporters, and also someone's hedgehog home that they put in their garden. And then finally, for those of you that would like to get a little bit more involved, we do have a survey called Living with Mammals. It is a bit more of an intense survey. It starts on the 29th of March. So it's coming up. You can sign up from the 22nd of March. And we basically just ask people to record all the mammals that they see in their garden or local green space. It can be a park, it can be a green, just a local area. And how many mammals you see, including hedgehogs, over a 12-week period. Don't worry, we're not going to ask you to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and tell us what you see. It's more like if you do a regular walk every morning, if you walk your dog, or if you just sit and have a cup of coffee out in your garden, just tell us what you see every day for 12 weeks. And if you have enjoyed this information tonight and you would like to keep up to date with hedgehog information in our comms, you can actually become a hedgehog champion. We have 91,000 so far for Hedgehog Street. It's a joint campaign that we run with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. And yeah, you can become a hedgehog champion and you get access to loads of different resources, presentations, activities for kids. There's also a forum on there, so you can actually meet other hedgehog champions, liaise with them, see what works well for them, what doesn't, that kind of thing. And it is a really successful campaign. From this, we've had 7,243 natural feeding areas created, over 15,000 gardens linked, hazards removed. We've had parties or events held for hedgehogs to raise awareness and money. And also we've had over 58,000 hedgehog sightings on our BIG Hedgehog Map, which again gives us really useful information about how they're doing across the UK. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Here are just some links that I've just been talking to. We've got the BIG Hedgehog Map where you can map your hedgehog or your hedgehog hole. The My Garden website, the web page is where you'll find all the information that I've talked about tonight. The other one is the Living with Mammals survey. And of course, take down my email if you have any specific questions or you want to get in touch afterwards or you want me to link you to any other information. But yeah, I'm sure George will be able to put these links in the Facebook group anyway, if you don't have a pen or paper to hand. But yeah, thank you guys.
No problem. Thank you, Holly. That was really informative, really good. Thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed that as well. I believe we've also been joined by Grace as well. I think Grace has joined you as well, and Holly now to help with a little bit with the Q&A maybe. We've got a few questions that have come in over the course of your talk. And we haven't had any come in on Facebook yet. So if anyone who is watching on Facebook would like to pop any in there in the chat box or the comments box, then please feel free to do so. I think we've got a couple of people watching on there as we speak. Is that okay with you if we answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, cool. Let's go.
Yep, brilliant. Fantastic. So Anne Rose asked, one of the risks you said was flailing. What does that mean in this context? Thank you.
Grace might be better to answer this one.
Just in terms of, because flailing's a bit like strimming, isn't it? It's kind of manual clearance of land. So we just want to make sure. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so just making sure to thoroughly check areas before going in to do any land clearance or anything like that. Or if it's a really kind of wild area, doing a bit of an initial cut, maybe to about a foot, and then kind of doing a check and then just making sure that there isn't any hedgehogs in there.
Superb. And is that answering your question? Feel free to pop something in the chat box if you like. We have another question that's come in from Pascal. That is, what is a safe way to check if there's a hedgehog in a leaf pile or area of high grass or a wild corner?
So personally, I would basically, I wouldn't go rummaging through. I would very much leave them alone, especially if they're nesting or they have hoglets in there. I think one of the best things you can do is what I mentioned, look out for any signs, any drop-ins, any footprints, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't necessarily go in and look for them. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Grace, but I would just, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, just to be really, really careful. We know that if a mother's in there with hoglets, that she can actually abandon her hoglets if she feels threatened, if the hoglets aren't big enough to kind of move themselves yet. So just being really, really careful. And yeah, if you do need to check an area, just do it extremely cautiously, very slowly. And if you see any hint of movement, just to sort of back off and leave whatever's in there to their own devices.
Yeah, and if you do, I guess if you have a log pile with a clear entrance that they use, again, like I said earlier, maybe you could just put a little twig in front of it and it will knock it out of the way. And that's just a good way to know if you do have a hedgehog using that area.
Superb. Thank you very much. Next question is coming from Karen. How do we stop the contractors strimming their nests?
So this is a tricky one. We do actually work with a lot of developers to ensure that they can minimize their negative impact on hedgehogs. We do actually also, so we are actually funding a really interesting piece of research at the moment, and it's actually using sniffer dogs to sniff out hedgehog nests and hedgehogs. So it's being trialed where people can now hire dogs to basically sniff out an area to see if there's any nests or hedgehogs nearby, and then if they are, obviously make sure that the hedgehogs are moved before strimming, or if they can be left alone, then yeah, left alone. But Grace, do you have anything to add to that? I guess you work with a lot of the developers.
Yeah, so I suppose on development sites, we would hope that basically hedgehogs should be taken into consideration on development sites if there's any sort of land clearance, but it's guidance that they should do that, but it's not necessarily kind of written into law. So sadly, these things do often go ahead. But I think what you can do is just literally go up to any contractors and just sort of approach them and say, you know, this is potentially an area that's just have a look, grass verges. Yeah, potentially just kind of approaching them if you feel safe to do so, and just kind of saying, you know, this is an area where there might be wildlife that you might be, you know, hurting. Because while it's not necessarily law to survey for hedgehogs beforehand and sort of take them into consideration, it is a crime to sort of recklessly injure one if you go in with a piece of equipment that's potentially going to put them in breach of the legislation that protects hedgehogs. So if you feel comfortable sort of talking to the person who's doing the work, or if it's sort of someone on behalf of, you know, council or development company, kind of getting in touch with head office and saying, this is going on, you know, are you aware that this is an area that's potentially going to have wildlife and they're going to get harmed in the process of this?
Cool. Brilliant. I think I'll just quickly come in there a little bit as well, if you don't mind, putting my councillor hat on a little bit. If you are concerned about any verges that are being cut having any sort of wildlife, be it wildflowers or being hedgehogs, then it's definitely worth getting in touch with East Sussex Highways, who are the highways agency for the area, who do most of the grass cutting in New Haven. Also getting in touch with New Haven Town Council too. We do have something called wildflower verges. And you can get verges designated to only have I think it's one cut a year. So that's definitely worth bringing up as well, I think, in that instance. I will quickly find the next one. What are any other signs you have hedgehogs visiting your garden? When I put my tongue in.
So I think, yeah, Holly, you mentioned there about kind of looking for droppings, looking for footprints, sort of looking for signs of them, which is generally going to be a good way. I'm not sure if you mentioned, but also just checking on the BIG Hedgehog Map. You can do a bit of a local check. So I could just go on, put in my postcode, and it brings up a sort of square around where I am. And it just shows, you know, if there's been any hedgehog sightings. And you can sort of filter the map by the year as well. So you can see if there's been records, you know, this last year, if there's kind of any older ones, and then progressively there's been less or more. So using the BIG Hedgehog Map for that purpose, sort of, you know, because you can log hedgehogs on there, but you can also check areas. So having a look on there and just seeing if there's any records in your local area, that's going to give a good indication of whether they're in the area.
Yeah, it's a really, really good map as well. I've used it personally, and I know there's quite a lot of logs up the mountain in New Haven. For example, I've also put a couple on there myself. I know you can also log like hedgehog holes and hedgehog highways on there as well, which is really, really good. So we've got another one here. Composting is also a good way to have a living garden. Are hedgehogs also using these to feed?
Yeah, so with any kind of like composting or mulch or leaf mold, that kind of thing, it does attract insects. So they will also be beneficial to hedgehogs for the insects that do use them as a breeding ground, or beetles, that kind of thing, wood lice. So yeah, compost heaps are also really a good thing as well. You can put leaf litter onto compost heaps. You can put mulch on there. So yeah, it is another good thing as well to encourage hedgehogs.
Superb, thank you. A question from Joanne that's just come in. How can I convince my fake grass roundup and stark fence loving neighbours to love nature?
It's really hard, isn't it?
Story of our lives.
Yeah, it's really tricky, and you know the artificial grass does, you know, it looks nice and green all year round and all this, but it's just going to create a sort of a biological desert. There's just not going to be anything living there. I think it's really tricky, and it depends on the people that you're dealing with, to be honest. It's sort of trying to just persuade people. We've got lots of advice and resources on the Hedgehog Street website for how to engage with neighbours, just sort of tips and tricks and things that, you know, that we've sort of come across that work. And we've got guides to sort of speaking to neighbours. We've got little invitations that you can put through neighbours' doors, things like that. I think the good thing with hedgehogs is that, generally speaking, when, you know, people do want to help them, they do want to protect them. So generally speaking, they're not too hard to sell, if you see what I mean. I used to work with bats, and that's much more difficult to kind of get people on side. They're a little bit more divisive than hedgehogs. So I think just having a chat with people, you know, if you've got any nice sort of pictures or footage or anything, just sharing that with people, because obviously they're a very cute animal. They're nice for engagement. So it's tricky. It sort of depends on what people's objections are to sort of various things in their garden, whether why they've got this artificial grass. It sort of depends on the reasons. But we've sort of got a section on the website for just different tips and advice. And there's also the Hedgehog Street forum that Holly mentioned, so you could always add a question on there, because different people are going to have had different experiences with different types of neighbours, different types of people. So just having a look on there, maybe asking a question and see if there's any top tips from people.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question just coming from Jane. Our hedgehog was coming out to feed every night until early January. Is that normal? Will it hibernate longer to compensate?
So in terms of hibernation, it's triggered by sort of environmental conditions. So when it gets colder, we would expect them to be hibernating. But the reason for that is because when the weather's colder, there's fewer insects for them to eat. But if they've got this sort of source of food, then they don't always go into hibernation. It can sort of disrupt that natural pattern. And there's actually some research going on at the moment to see whether the food in winter is sort of helping them, if it's helping the later hoglets from the year before, whether it's kind of giving them that little boost of food that they need, or whether it's actually hindering the natural hibernation process in larger animals. So that's ongoing research. It'll be quite interesting to see what the results are of that. But I mean, generally our advice is to keep feeding through winter, and if they've got food and, you know, a safe place to nest, then, you know, technically speaking, they don't need to hibernate. You know, they're not, hibernation's a sort of strategy where they just kind of shut, you know, they close everything off. They almost just hit the pause button until conditions improve, until there's more food available for them. But if there's food available, then, you know, they can eat it. So we're seeing more and more reports of hedgehogs being active all winter. So, but yeah, the jury's out on whether that's a good or a bad thing at the moment.
No, that's brilliant. Karen has asked as well, how can the hedgehog scheme feedback locally so that we can have we have an idea of how the hedgehogs are doing and can encourage and target our streets?
So in terms of what I was mentioning before about the BIG Hedgehog Map, it's great for, you know, logging records and contributing that important biological data, but it's also a tool for checking your local area, you know, to see what's going on. You can let people in the local area know about the BIG Hedgehog Map. You can log your own records. It's a national map, but it gives you a really good kind of local picture of what's going on as well. So it's certainly, it's good to be used for just having a look and see what the hedgehog situation is in your area.
Absolutely. Kathy is sharing my excitement, saying, I'm so happy to see so many people have seen hedgehogs recently. It's great news, isn't it, given the huge decline that I'm aware they've had recently. So that's great news. A load of thank yous coming in, which is fantastic. And then Kathy's asked, how do you wake hedgehogs after hibernation?
It's not a case of waking them. It's a sort of natural process. It would be letting them wake up on their own. It's not actually, I think people think that it's sleep, which I suppose it kind of looks like sleep because they're there and they're not moving, but it's a natural process where they basically drop their body temperature. They sort of reduce all of their biological processes. And actually it takes them quite a few hours to come out of hibernation. So any kind of disturbance or anything like that is actually quite dangerous for them. It uses up their energy stores. So best advice is just to sort of leave them as undisturbed as possible. If you've ever got any concerns about them, if the weather's getting quite warm and they're still not moving, the best advice would be to give the British Hedgehog Preservation Society a call. There's a number on their website, and they've got advice and things sort of 24 hours a day. There'll be advice on that phone line.
Awesome. That's really good to know. Definitely. There's one here which I think I'll partially answer, but also probably for you as well, Holly. Are the slides going to be available after the presentation? And thank you for the great presentation. I'll quickly add that the live stream that is currently being recorded will be saved onto the Facebook group. We're also going to be uploading this onto the YouTube channel, and that'll be emailed around. So you're welcome to see it all there again. I don't know, Holly, if you know if the presentation's online anywhere as well, is it?
It's not, but you're more than welcome to have it. If you want me to send it to you, email me, get in touch. I'll send you the information, send you the slides.
Okay, that'd be amazing, Holly. Thank you, and we'll get that sent round. I think if Karen doesn't mind, get that sent round to everyone on the mailing list as well. Thank you.
There's just to quickly mention, there's
right.
slides on the Hedgehog Street website as well. If anybody wanted to do their own talk on hedgehogs, maybe for their street or for their local community.
Yes, good idea.
Yeah, there's slides and some notes on there which are really handy. I might just, because I've spotted a couple of things in the chat, there was something about the stickers that you can put on strimmers. They do still exist. They're available from the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, and they can supply them to sort of local councils or sort of land management companies or whoever needs them. So it would just be a case of getting in touch with them, and they're just little yellow stickers that you would put on the handle of your strimmer or your mower, and it just says, please check for hedgehogs. So it might just sort of, it might just prompt that person to sort of do that check. So it's really, really good idea.
That's really good, actually. That's really good to know. Fantastic. Julie's asked, when do they start breeding?
So the mating season is, so basically they wake up from hibernation in kind of March, April, when the weather starts to get a little bit milder. They need to feed up a lot. They need to eat loads of food. So now's a really good time to start putting that extra food out for them. And then when they've gained that weight again, once they're nice and round and tubby again, that's when the mating season starts. So from around sort of April all the way through until late summer, but the period of sort of peak activity would generally be May. It was a little bit earlier last year. We were getting a lot of pictures and videos of hedgehogs mating quite early last year, I think because we had quite sort of warm weather earlier in the year. But yeah, generally, so there's a little phase after hibernation where they're just trying to sort of feed and get their energy stores back up, and then sort of late spring, early summer, so sort of around kind of April, May, June and onwards.
Amazing. That's really good. Another message has come in. We've seen hedgehogs scratching themselves frantically. Is there anything you can do to help them?
It's best to just leave them. It's actually completely normal for hedgehogs to have some fleas on them. The fleas are what we call host specific. So they live on hedgehogs, but they can't live on people. They can't live on, cats and dogs and things. So don't worry about them kind of transmitting to your pets and things. Commercial flea treatments are generally too strong for hedgehogs and they're just going to hurt them. So it's best to leave them. I know it looks worrying and they're walking around sort of scratching every couple of paces, but it is normal. But if you were ever concerned about them, if you thought they were kind of starting to scratch a bit more, or if it was causing them to sort of look a bit unwell, or if they were kind of lying down in the daylight or kind of stumbling or anything like that, again, it would just be a case of contacting the Hedgehog Society and just getting some advice, and potentially getting the hedgehog along to a local carer.
Spot on. We've got a question from Linda. When is the best time to make a hedgehog home?
Do this all year round, really, especially if you're making your own. It's a good activity to do when there's not much else to do in your garden. Of course, when they come out of hibernation, you can have it ready for them to have as a breeding nest. So get a ready-made house for mothers with hoglets, but quite equally, they can use the hedgehog house as a hibernation or just a daytime nest. So there really is no right time. You can do it whenever.
Yeah, lovely. Susan's asked, do you have any advice for initiating a hedgehog hole network in a local community?
So again, it would be a case of having a look at the information on our website. We've got sort of little tips and resources and things for engaging with neighbours. One thing that's an increasingly popular way to sort of engage with people, especially at the moment while we can't talk face to face, is on social media. So a lot of streets and little community groups have a Facebook group where they all kind of chat and say, well, I've seen a hedgehog, on this date, like, well, I've seen one as well. So social media is a really good way to go. Putting up posters and things in shops, in post offices, if there's sort of community notice boards, things like that. Directing people to the Hedgehog Street website. There's lots of advice on the website for sort of different situations, but it's a really nice thing to do, and it's nice when there's that kind of, because it's good, there's a lot of national organizations, but it's nice if there's kind of local initiatives as well. And certainly if anybody wanted to get in touch or say, we've set up this local group, what advice have you got, we can certainly liaise and lend a helping hand, maybe put you in touch with other groups in the area or other similar size groups and things like that. So do certainly get in touch if you fancy in doing something like that.
Spot on. And so that sort of links into what has come in next about if it's possible to send us the link on how to contact your neighbour about looking after hedgehogs. Would it be possible, if possible, with both of you to get like a list of links and contacts that you would suggest? Would that be possible? If you want to email them to me and we can circulate those around, that would be really, really cool.
Definitely,
yeah.
Thank you very, very much. Lots of thanks coming in, which is really lovely.
Oh, thanks.
I've got one. I'm not sure, Karen, you might want to come in on this one. You said, is that more because of climate change?
What was that?
Alluding to?
Yeah, what was that? That was
Were we talking about hibernation? I feel like it came in.
Yeah, you said they weren't sleeping as much. So I wondered if it's because it's warmer.
Again, that's something that's being looked into. There's research ongoing about the effect of climate change on hedgehogs, but certainly we're seeing much warmer temperatures, and it could well be the case. I would not be surprised if there was, because we're increasingly seeing more mild weather. I mean, the patch of mild weather we just had a couple of weeks ago in February. I mean, I was out in a t-shirt and it was February and I was thinking this doesn't seem right. So that could certainly be a factor. So it's something that we're supporting some research on, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of that.
Cool. That'd be really interesting to find out, actually, especially as we sort of learn more and more about what climate change could entail. So that's really, really interesting. Anne has asked, are dried mealworms okay?
Best to avoid, I would say. There's a lot of carers in the UK that have found that a diet high in mealworms is causing metabolic bone disease in hedgehogs. And again, I feel like this is my line of the night, but there is some research going on about this. But the advice in the meantime is to avoid mealworms because of this potential issue. There's better ththings to feed them, meaty cat and dog food. I'm sure Holly was saying specialist hedgehog food online. A lot of people say, oh, but the hedgehogs really love the mealworms, and it's, they do really enjoy them, but I think the analogy I've heard used is, it's a bit like us and fast food, we'd love sitting and eating crisps and things, but it's not really that good for us. So we'd kind of be steering people more towards just the meaty cat or dog food. And more specifically, I've heard that Tesco kitten biscuits seem to be a favorite. So
our hedgehogs are massive fans of it, that's for sure.
Not to endorse particular
boxes and boxes of it.
It's not sponsored, I promise.
No, I haven't. I'm not in cahoots with Tesco, but it's meant to be. I think Sainsbury's kitten biscuits as well, because I think the kitten food has a nice array of vitamins and minerals and whatever else is in there.
All that stuff.
Yeah. All that good
am
stuff.
I right in saying as well, if you don't mind, because I've with the job that I do, we talk about hedgehogs a lot, but one of the things that we've always told people is that the other problem with mealworms is because of their natural high potassium levels in hedgehogs as well as in mealworms, that actually it could lead to issues with bone density within hedgehogs. That's what I've heard anyway.
So it's this metabolic bone disease that's been seen, and that's it's to do. I watched a talk on it at a conference last year, but it's to do with the calcium and phosphate levels. Calcium. And so you want the levels to be kind of balanced with each other, but I think them like a diet high in mealworms can kind of throw that off, and potentially cause problems with with their bones. So
fair play.
yeah, best to avoid. If there's a couple that have fallen off you feed, if you've got them up for birds and there's a couple on the ground and they eat them, it's not the end of the world, but we just wouldn't want whole bowls of mealworms out.
That's really, really good to clarify and good to know, actually, because I've heard from my role, I've heard some quite stark horror stories about mealworms. I know people used to put them out of the streets, and I think from what I've heard, at least, and you've sort of counteracted it, it's okay now and again, but it's best to avoid it. It's a bit like sitting there and eating fast food, as you say. It's not great. And actually, it's probably cheaper to buy a unnamed supermarket brands cat foods as well. So and we go through tons of it.
Yeah, and I think even if you sort of, even if you think that
okay.
you're just sort of putting a few out as a little treat, they can travel 2 kilometers in a single night, so you don't know what they're getting fed in other gardens. So it's best to just stick to the recommended sort of food. That's and they do still love that as well. They like the kind of meaty cat and dog food, so it's still going to be nice for them.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Got a question here that I think is for Karen and Greenhavens, really, according to Anne. My garden neighbours are allotments. Are allotment societies involved with Greenhavens? My hedgehog holes are often blocked from the other side. That's very sad, isn't it?
I have answered.
You have? Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's all right. We've got all of the community gardens, which is about 9. But no, none of the allotments. And I think it's a very good point that we ought to go and make friends and see what we can do there. Definitely. Well done, Anne. Great
point raised there. And I think from what I'm seeing, it might be the last. Oh, no, spoke too soon. That's okay. Keep the questions coming. I think we've got a little bit of time left. If you are both okay with that. We've got a question here. Has lockdown affected hedgehog activity at all?
Oh, I get asked that one a lot. It's kind of too soon to say a little bit. What we were getting during lockdown 1 last year was a lot of reports from people saying, I've lived here 10, 15 years, never seen a hedgehog, but suddenly they're in my garden. And I think it was more a case that people were spending more time in their gardens and kind of seeing what they wouldn't normally see. So there was a little bit of that. But then equally, I had reports, there was a village project. There's a village in Oxfordshire who've set up a hedgehog project. They had a really healthy population and they completely disappeared. Wow. And it was potentially more to do with because we had a really dry May last year. But they think that because there was fewer cars on the roads, that it was meaning that there was less roadkill of other species, and actually badgers prey a lot on they scavenged the roadkill. So because they didn't have their normal prey, they were sort of coming further into this village to prey on hedgehogs. And they think that's, it either sort of they either all got predated by the hedgehogs, by the badgers, or they sort of completely moved out of the area because of the increased presence of badgers. This isn't really scientific, but this is what they were thinking, just that the balance, that hedgehogs and badgers normally have in that area was upset by the badgers' usual prey kind of not being available anymore. Because badgers do prey on hedgehogs, it's not a major factor in the decline of hedgehogs, and they can coexist where there's enough kind of insect prey for them. But on this occasion, it looked as though, they were feeding a lot on roadkill, and because there wasn't as much roadkill, they were coming to get the hedgehogs. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
That was a bit of a roundabout answer, but essentially lots of different reports from last year. So really difficult to tell, actually. I think, with lockdown, there was things that might have helped them, things that might have hindered them. So, yeah, really difficult to say.
Not at all. It seems to be linked to the whole climate change and a climate change question about how climate change links in. It's one of those things we will sort of tell in time, won't we? I think also our show has been stolen a little bit by a little cat. Lovely cat sitting in Holly's background. I could not help but grin.
This is my sister's cat, Lily. Sorry. That's why I'm smirking.
It wouldn't be a proper Teams call without a cat jumping in, would it?
Every time I have a work call, she just likes to come up on there and everyone starts laughing. Of course she wants to say hi to everyone. I did just see a question about rats, so I just wanted to...
Yes, I was about to ask that one. Yes.
All right, yeah, okay. So Unfortunately, like hedgehog feeding stations aren't rat proof as such. It's really hard because they are similar sizes. So the only thing I can say is that if you think you have rats in your garden, or you've started to put hedgehog food out and you can see signs that there's rats, the best thing you can do is firstly just stop putting food out for a few weeks. The rats they'll go away and they'll start to look elsewhere for more food. Or if you know you have hedgehogs in your garden and they come out at specific times, say like dusk, put the food out for a couple of hours, see if they eat it, see if any's gone, and then take it back in so it's not out all night, so rats can't get their hands on it. And then lastly, another tip, it's not like scientifically proven, but we have heard that it works for some people, is if you put food in a saucer and then another saucer on top, hedgehogs will tend to flip the saucer off to get to the food, whereas rats won't. So that also could be something that works, but again, it's not scientifically proven. But as a whole, you can't necessarily make it rat proof as such, unfortunately.
There's one extra tip as well. This is one that I've heard more recently, is that hedgehogs know how to navigate a sort of flap mechanism. So a bit like a cat flap into the feeding station. I'm not sure how you'd set it up, or it'd need a little bit more thought, but a hedgehog will know to go through some kind of flap, whereas a rat wouldn't, is another one. And I think, I've had a couple of, stories from people saying that does work. So if you just want it, if you had your feeding station, but maybe just put something a little bit more, like some kind of hinge, and like a cat flap, basically. That's puzzle. That's a little bit vague, but I think let your imagination run wild.
That's really interesting, and I think from my personal perspective, when it comes to food bowls, we've used cat bowls in the past, and we've actually woken up in the morning, gone down to check the feeding station. They have pulled the bowl out. The hedgehogs have pulled the bowl out and walked it about 10 meters up the garden. So in protest of it being empty, which I found quite hilarious, and we've got it caught on camera doing it as well. So it pretty funny. We've got another one here from Susie. If we will just try to start to wrap up the Q&A a little bit. We have cats who I think might scoff the cat food or kitten biscuits. Is there anything else particular they might like? Anything else they might like in particular for the cats won't go for? I know before. I think one of the ways that I know before. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can set up like a. You can't see my hands very well. Set up like a twisty sort of mazy type thing to go through, can't you? Or put it close to a wall and put a brick in the way. And I don't know if I'm describing that very well, but how would you suggest?
In terms of the food, I think because of the food that we recommend, cat food, it's going to be tricky because, and I think cats are just generally a bit greedy and they'll, eat anything. Sorry, I don't mean to offend your cat, Holly, but
there's two of them now. They're like squaring up to each other. So I'm sorry if I look away.
I think a better idea would be a feeding station. So there's sort of plans for that on the website. So something just like an upturned plastic box with a small entryway cut out. If you sort of Google it, there's like a search function on the Hedgehog Street website, and I sort of put a page together of tips to keep cats away from hedgehog food, and sort of tried to compile tips from hedgehog champions, my own experience with cats in the garden. So do have a look on there because there's a few different tips. Things like cats don't like to get their paws wet, so putting a bowl of water at the entrance of the feeding station, just little tips and things like that. So it's worth trying. In terms of in terms of food as well, obviously they're natural prey, so all your kind of creepy crawlies in the garden, that's not something cats are going to eat. So definitely worth doing a bit of wildlife gardening, or the lovely mould and leaf piles that Holly was mentioning. They're going to increase that natural food for them as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I don't know if you already said, Grace, but on one of my slides earlier about the feeding station, again, if you have like that 13 times 13 centimeter entrance, most pets can't really fit through that. So that's another thing to add if you don't want to encourage cats to get the food.
There's a question that's popped up there about sort of collecting snails and slugs. It's actually best, they don't actually form that big of a part of a hedgehog's diet, and actually it can give them lungworm, so best to avoid that. But I mean, if there's if that natural insect prey is in the garden, they'll find it. They've got such a good sense of smell, so it's if you can sort of encourage that into your garden, that's they'll find it basically.
we've got a bit of a sad one that's coming from David, but it's undoubtedly something that is quite a large issue at the moment, especially with the amount of development that we're seeing in the local area. And in fact, I've seen it over the road as well. But David has said, we've seen 2 large areas, several acres of scrubland cleared recently in preparation for making a planning application. Hedgehogs undoubtedly died. Are there any laws we can use to prevent this type of clearance by bulldozer?
So this, again, it's a tricky one, because at the moment hedgehogs themselves are protected from harm in the Wildlife and Countryside Act, but their nesting sites aren't necessarily. So really developers should be, they've got a duty of care to sort of check for hedgehogs, but also for kind of protected species. There might be other things in there, great crested newts, there might be bat roosts in the trees and things. So they do have a duty of care to, undertake these wildlife surveys. So certainly it's worth raising concerns, if you've got any with the local planning authority. If you think that something's happening that's causing immediate and direct harm to wildlife or any protected species, you can contact a wildlife crime officer. You can call 101 and ask for, a wildlife crime officer and sort of speak to them. So if if something's happening, it's immediate and you've got really sort of tangible concerns that there's, that it's going to cause this damage, then, it's potentially worth doing that. What we're actually pushing for at the moment, so we're working with our MP species champion, and he's tabled an amendment to the Environment Bill because we want hedgehogs to be a Schedule 5 species in the Wildlife and Countryside Act, which is a lot of jargon, but basically it would mean that their nesting sites would be protected as well. That's ultimately what we want, because it would mean that these developers have to survey in advance of anything. They have to do, immediate checks of any kind of scrub that they're clearing, and just take that responsibility to check for hedgehogs on these sites. So that's really what we're pushing for. And you can write to your MP and ask them to support this amendment as well, if you wanted to kind of get involved and help with that effort. I think the Environment Bill's next in the Commons in May. It's not for a little while, so you've got time. If you go on the Hedgehog Street website, and I think if you just search lobby, it's because we're asking people to lobby their MPs, and we've put together a template letter that you can send to your MP, and that's a really positive way to help.
That's fantastic. Really important to know that it is being looked into, if in my opinion maybe a little bit later than it should be, but it's good that finally some actions being taken and that MPs are listening, which is great. And ultimately it's the power of the people yet again, making things happen.
I don't know how to press my hand, George.
That's all right.
I can't even find it.
That's all right.
I just wanted to add on that, because I deal with this quite a lot, and it's super difficult to prosecute under the Countryside Act. So what we really need is the locals to already have photographed that those species that they've seen, the adders, the hedgehogs, whatever it is, and you build that evidence up, so your local space, and you've got that evidence to show your PCSO. And if they've got that evidence already before the developers have even cracked on and are doing their thing, you've got a much better chance of stopping that work and them taking you seriously and actually getting a successful prosecution. So all your photos that you take when you're thinking it's just a beautiful picture because you spotted something, actually if you're putting it up on the hedgehog site or on the Sussex Biological Record Centre, all of that really makes a superb difference to stopping these awful travesties that are happening so much in the southeast. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, not at all, Karen.
No, that's definitely true. That evidence is really important. And we run the BIG Hedgehog Map, where you can log sightings of live, dead or road killed hedgehogs, and it's a really pretty website, and it just it's a really nice engagement tool. But we do share that biological data with various record centres. We share it with the NBN Atlas, so if there was any kind of species searches in advance of a development happening, then that's all the records that you've submitted for us would be available.
It absolutely is. I agree completely. Being on planning down here, we've seen a lot of or quite a few applications in the last few years come in that have been greenfield, and we're seeing more of those no matter how you look at it. We're seeing a lot of these come in over the next sort of 10, 15 years, and certainly a lot at the moment, especially in Peacehaven and New Haven. And keeping an eye and using your passion on the green spaces, you have the knowledge, and it's really, really important to share that with planning authorities, even the developer, the police where needed, and of course with people that collate the data like Hedgehog Street and the records offices as well. We've had a couple of recent examples, myself and some other people as well, in New Haven particularly, where it has really helped to have that evidence. So there really is a case nowadays for power to the people, and I think without going full campaign on this, it really does come down to the fact that we can make a difference and we can help nature, be it in our gardens, be it with planning, be it with the verges, be it wherever we are. We may only be one person or a few people, but we can make a serious difference in this world. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yes.
But I'm a firm believer of that. And with organisations such as yourselves, the RSPB do some fantastic work, the BTO do some fantastic work, and the Hedgehog Preservation Society and all those organisations. But ultimately, they need our help. The organisations and the wildlife need our help. So, and I think hopefully this talk has inspired that. I know it has myself, and I can see a few other people as well with the amount of thanks that are coming in. So thank you, Holly and Grace, for the talk and for the really informative Q&A as well. That was really, really good.
Of course, and if anyone needs any more information or wants to get in touch, feel free.
Spot on. I think Karen wanted to come in and tell us a little bit more about the urban wilding project that's going to be hosting over the next few weeks that this is a part of. Karen, you are welcome to unmute, as always.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Thank you, Grace. That was awesome. Really, really good. And Greenhavens Network, all our members, whenever we get a hedgehog post, it's probably one of the most liked and commented on posts as we go through. So they're favourites in this area, which is what Wilder Gardens is for us locally. It's when we were doing our mapping and connectivity, we realised that although we had some verges and we've got some great green spaces, they're actually really, really confined and sandwiched in because we've got the boundary of the national park around us. So we're very urbanised, and trying to do connectivity, little hedgehog homes is a vision that we have for all our gardens. And if everybody in a street like yourselves, if we could make that happen in New Haven, Peacehaven, Seaford and Lewis, that'd be amazing. So that is what Wilder Gardens is about, and that's kind of our connectivity project that Greenhavens is focusing on. But we can't do it on our own, guys, and that's why I'm doing my little spill. We need some more volunteers. We're looking at whether you want to champion in your own street or your community, or just get involved in the project planning team. We do need some people, so message us, Facebook, email, and let us know if you're up for helping that project transform. We've got a few more speakers this month, so don't miss out. We've got one every Wednesday, which we hope will inspire you to inspire others. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And I think that goes back to the whole thing that's sort of been the mantra of this whole evening has been every little does help. Again, we were quoting Tesco again. We need to stop doing that. But every little does help, and even just putting a bit of food out in the garden to trying to work with the community and a street to an entire town to an entire district on changing people's perceptions or educating people, because a lot of it, people are, especially now more than ever from what I've seen personally, and I know a lot of seen, is that people are very aware of what's happening now. And I think lockdown has been a massive time where people are finally being able to engage more with nature. A lot of it now comes down to what can we do, and people need to realize that you can do it in whatever capacity you like. And I think the Wilder Gardens Project is a great way to get involved, along with all our friends of groups and all our other community groups in the area too. So definitely worth getting involved if you can. From anything to doing a little bit of a litter pick to cutting off a branch every now and again, or even being a chair of a group. It's great to be involved with. So yeah, I'll wrap this up here because it is 8 o'clock now. Thank you everyone for coming along. We've got a great talk next week, as Karen said, Busy Bees in the Garden from Dr. Nikki Gammons. And that'll be at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. You can obviously join that through Eventbrite as normal. Thank you everyone for getting involved. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Grace and Holly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.